Welcome to episode 151 of Radio 815, the podcast dedicated to examining the work of writer-director J.J. Abrams, as well as his creator, Bad Robot Universe. I'm your host for this week. My name is Marcelo Inostroza, joined as always by my fellow co-host, Matt Crandall. And on today's edition of the show, we will be discussing the season 2 premiere of What About Bryan, entitled What About Second Chances? I have a question for you, Matt. Would you like some coffee with that sugar?
Yeah, a very familiar moment as Bryan, sitting at a diner, starts loading about 8 packets of sugar into his coffee right before he is in a massive car wreck that changes his whole perspective. So what we realize is that we have done a time jump. We are 6 months from where we last ended the first season. And this episode, What About Second Chances, signals kind of the rebooting of the show for season 2, where they are going to retool some things, add some characters, and the show is called What About Bryan? And from here on out, in Friends fashion, all the episodes are titled What About Something. Which was not the case for the first season. So the writers realized, oh, maybe we should do like cutesy titles for all the episodes, and they do that from now on. So What About Second Chances, picking up 6 months after the last scene we had was Bryan and Marjorie having their fight about, what the hell am I supposed to do if I'm in love with you, but you aren't going to leave Adam, and this is never going to be. And Adam watching from the balcony and seeing that his fiance and his best friend were having a lover's quarrel. And so we realized that Bryan left town after this, and he has been roaming around for 6 months, and he has left all of his friends behind because rather than face this issue and figure out what he's going to do about it, he chose to run. And we do see him at that diner, and he's getting a coffee, and he's kind of explaining to the guy working the counter what's going on, and the guy's like, phew, boy, like that's a situation I've heard before. I don't know what you're gonna do, but you better figure it out. And we see Bryan at the crossroads deciding if he's gonna go back home or if he's gonna go further away from his problems and continue to avoid the big elephant in the room that he's eventually gonna have to face down. And he starts to turn to go away, and his car is plowed into by a transport. What are you thinking, Marcelo, as Bryan is in this car wreck that 90% of people would have died in, but Bryan miraculously survives?
I was thinking that's a little bit of TV magic, but I really like the moment where Bryan is sort of sitting at the bar talking to the bartender, and as he's talking to him, sort of explaining his situation, he keeps opening up sugar packets and pouring them into his coffee. But it must be really, really annoying for the actor or actress after several takes. I really liked the opening. I really thought that Bryan was going to be gone for like half the season, and we were going to get to see Bryan come into his own before he eventually joined his group of friends, and before he had to face the music with Marjorie and Adam. With that being said, I did cry foul when he was pulling out of the gas station and his car got T-boned by the truck, because I'm like, there's no fucking way that he would survive an accident like that, because the truck hit him flush on the driver's side of the car. But I'm like, if he dies, this show is over, because the show is called essentially What About Bryan? The other thing that I really liked is about this opening episode of season 2 is I really like that Dave and Dina are in therapy now, and they're kind of passively aggressively addressing their issues. So it's really, really nice to actually see them fight about their issues in this first episode and not actively avoid them like they were doing for most of season 1.
Yeah, we do see that after the fallout of, Dina slept with Richard, Dave found out and he slept with Suzanne to get back at her. We find out that like they both know that they have stepped out. He won't tell her who it was that he slept with, and they are now in couples therapy trying to work through this to figure out if they can get their marriage back on the same page, because they aren't ready to throw in the towel because they've got so many kids that they're trying to work through this, if anything, for the kids, but also because they do still love each other deep down. It's just that these issues keep popping up. And it is interesting to see, the therapist says like you should get a gift for one another to express, and they both get terrible, terrible gifts. So, a little bit after they have that thing, we find out that they did do the exercise. They both bought each other a present. And Dina opens up a pair of fuzzy handcuffs that Dave bought her. And she goes, "These aren't for me. These are for you. Like, this is something to use on me in the bedroom. And that's not a gift for me." And then he says, "Yeah, well, what did you get me?" And it's bunk beds. And he's like, "Well, this isn't a gift for me. This is to get the kids out of our bed. But again, that's something that's beneficial to you." So they both are going through the motions of the therapy stuff, but they are not getting to the heart of the matter because they both don't do the exercise right. They both buy the wrong kind of gifts. So it's frustrating to see them struggle this way, but we know that going forward, that's probably going to be an ongoing thing. It's not, even though this is 6 months later, they're not going to fix their marriage in episode 1. We're going to drag this out for at least a couple of episode arc. But they do have some nice moments, after all the gang is together, kind of getting ready for, we're a few days away from Adam and Marjorie's wedding. So the planning has gone on while Bryan has been gone. Bryan got invited to the wedding from Marjorie, we find out. It was not Adam. Adam is still fucking pissed at this dude. And so they're all having like a get together at Marjorie and Adam's place. And Bryan shows up and he comes to the door, and Marjorie's like, "Holy shit, it's Bryan. He's been gone for 6 months." And she's kind of glad to see him, but you can see on her face, like, there's still some conflicted feelings there. And we realize, everybody's going to be so mad at you, Bryan, because you've been gone. So, we're glad you're back, but get ready. And everybody is happy to see him. They are kind of pissed. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody except Adam, who, as soon as Bryan like peeks out from around the door, everybody's like, "Oh my God, it's Bryan." And Adam's like, "I got to go to the kitchen." Like, "See you later, asshole." And Bryan follows him in and he says like, "Hey dude, we got to talk this out." And they have a bit of an argument because Adam is like, I know you're scamming on my girl, and this isn't right. I'm your best friend, or I used to be. So for you to do that and break guy code is kind of shitty. And then for you to just fuck off for 6 months is even shittier. So what are you thinking as Bryan comes back and everybody's is relatively happy to see him, except Adam is like still pretty mad at this dude for what has transpired?
I just have one quick word to say on Dave and Dina getting the wrong gifts for each other. Dina getting the bunk beds because she thinks that if she gets the bunk beds for her kids, that will give her and Dave more romantic time. And then Dave completely misunderstanding the situation and getting Dina sexy handcuffs because that's what he wants. I really think the moment of that conversation, the moment of that interaction, is the moment where Dina says, "Okay, you want me to you want me to come out with it? You won't forgive me for for what I did to you, or you won't forgive me for breaking the rules and sleeping with John Hamm." And I really think that that shows growth on her part, and I really like the way that she sort of laid it out there on the table, and how Dave is the one, or she blames Dave for keeping them from progressing as a couple and coming to a new understanding. So I like that Dave is sort of keeping her in the doghouse, being that she was the one that went forward with the open marriage in season 1 when it's not what Dave really, really wanted. So I feel in some kind of way that's Dave sort of like sticking it to her in in some catharsis kind of way. So I really enjoyed that. I mean, I know that makes me sound like a dick, but I just enjoyed that part. The whole thing about everybody else being happy that Bryan came back home except Adam, that kind of pisses me off as well. And you know why that pisses me off? Because Adam, for most of season one, was a fucking was a fucking asshole who didn't understand what he had with Marjorie, and it took him the entire season to understand the beautiful, intelligent woman that he had. And what did it take for him to spy on his best friend, having a fight with his potential fiance to realize the type of man that he wanted to be and realize that he actually loved Marjorie and that he actually could commit to a relationship. Not to mention that he had to notice that the couple that he put up on a pedestal well, when it comes to romantic ideals was also having problems in David Dina. So listen, his reaction is completely justified because the worst thing that can happen is for your best friend to fall in love with your girlfriend or your fiance. That's the worst thing that's one of the worst things that can happen to a guy. But the thing that I'm having trouble with here is Adam's previous behavior in season one. And I don't know if I'm ready to let go of that guy because some lingering story points from that guy still exist and they still rear their head in this episode, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think there is going to be some growing pains with that because, the show had the rug pulled out from under it in terms of where they were going to go because of some stuff that goes on casting wise as this season progresses. And so I think they had to change storylines and plans. So instead of us hating Adam like we did for most of season one, where you really don't like the guy and they don't give you much to latch on, over the next couple episodes, we're supposed to feel more sympathetic towards him. And so they're trying to make him seem, like I said, there was that turn at the end of last season where all of a sudden he's like wife guy and he's all about, fidelity in marriage and all this stuff. And you're like, what? This guy hasn't been about this at all. Why are we changing course? But it's because there were a few, you know, surprises, I think, for the people writing this based on budget and circumstances that we'll have to roll with and see how that all plays out. This episode still feels like the status quo for the most part. It doesn't feel like a total reset. We do add 2 new characters, but as we go through the next couple is where we really start to see the radical season 2 changes take place. And so Bryan and Adam have their talk and it doesn't go good. And so Bryan decides, I got to work this out with Adam before the wedding, because Adam is like, I didn't invite you to this fucking thing. I don't want you there. Like, you piece of shit. And so he shows up. Adam is shooting hoops with what we find out is Adam's new best friend since Bryan has blown town, played by Jason George as this character named Jimmy. And so Jimmy and Adam are shooting hoops, and we find out basically, the producers of this show sat down and they said, oh, we only have Nicole's husband is the only person who's not white on this show in the main cast. They're like, I guess maybe we should fix that because it's 2007 and it's unrealistic for this entire group to just be a bunch of white people. So they add Jason George, who is a great character actor, and like a handsome dude. So him and Adam are shooting hoops when Bryan shows up, and Jimmy and Bryan have kind of an awkward moment together. And then Bryan and Adam decide they have to be men and they can settle this on the court. So they are going to work out their aggression. And Bryan says, like, if I win, we settled this. It's done. We move on. If you win, I give you $50. And so, of course, it's not a clean game as they play one on one because Adam is still furious and pissed off. And it is something that maybe they could have worked through if Bryan didn't pick up and leave town for 6 months. So we're seeing the ripple effects of his bad decision making out there while they're on the court. Did you for a moment ever think that Bryan was going to actually win? Or did you know that, like, no matter what, their grudge was still going to continue until at least, maybe the end of the episode?
No, I thought no, no, no. When Brian came into the gym to try and reconnect with Adam, and we meet Adam's new friend George, who's a great character actor, like Matt said, and he actually has been forever a part of Shondaland. He's on station 19 now, I believe. He's a great character actor. But yeah, I had no doubt that Adam was going to either torture Brian or try to avoid him, which he did. But Brian was like that longtime friend that never says die, and he tried to interject himself into Adam's relationship with George, no matter what. It got to a point where, like Matt said, it just got really, really awkward and really, really uncomfortable. And when George took his leave and they started playing that one-on-one basketball game, I thought that it was going to come to fisticuffs because I'm like, Adam is such a he is such a guy that is absolutely pissed in this episode. Look, regardless of what I feel the character has done and is going to do, he was completely within his right to be pissed at Brian in this episode. And just because Brian came back home, watch me try and change my position right now. Brian can't expect everything to go back to the status quo just because he's back home. Because what he did is fucked up, and it all could have been avoided if he was truthful. If he was truthful with Adam, and if he was truthful with Marjorie. But if that happened, we wouldn't have this wonderful tension that we have cooking here in the first episode of season 2 of What About Brian. I want to ask you something because you mentioned, and you'll have to correct me on this, but are you saying that the writers knew at this point that the writing was on the wall and that they were dead, and that's why um, they sort of tried to make Adam a more sympathetic character because they knew that they were slowly going to their deaths? Or do you think at this time they still had hopes for renewal?
They certainly didn't think the show was dead, but they knew that they had written themselves into a huge Marjorie problem that was going to rear its head because certain people didn't come back for all of season 2. And when you have written a show where the main love triangle is your key focus and one of the triangle pieces gets a new job because you didn't sign them to a firm enough contract, you're kind of screwed. So you've got to start moving pieces around. And I think, the other noticeable thing, we pick up with Brian's sister who is pregnant and her husband is out of town the entire episode. And you're like, this is weird that this dude would just be out of town the entire episode. What's going on here? And we'll find out what's going on there as that guy remains out of town for like a long time. But she's now pregnant, so that's kind of the other new thread that they have given. So, last season the tension was going to be she was lying to her husband about all of this pregnancy fertilization drugs, and now we find out that like she's pregnant, and so there's no more drama from that, even though that was like a main story driver, we thought. But they've kind of abandoned that. Like now she's pregnant and it's all good. We don't have to worry about the fact that she was lying and taking all these drugs and acting erratic. We've moved on from it. But I think they didn't know that the show was going to get axed at this point. They still had hopes that if it was a hit, especially because the first season was a short season, mid-season replacement. They didn't have time, and because it was a show produced by Bad Robot and J.J. Abrams, ABC was going to give them a fair shot. Um, I do think that luckily this premiered in the fall, so it wasn't mid-season, but I think at about the halfway mark, then that is when the writing is kind of on the wall because they know the ratings have not shot up. If anything, I believe they probably went down. But there are, you know, a lot of behind the scenes things that caused the shift in tone. And so, do you think Nicole being pregnant and then us seeing her at like yoga class and being annoyed and stuff is the right way to go? Should they have dragged out the tension of her sneaking around with these drugs behind Angela's back longer? Or is it good that we just 6 months later she's pregnant?
If you can remember going into season 2, one of the things that I was really looking forward to for some strange reason, I don't know why, is the potential drama between Nicole and Angelo, because that was one of the lingering threads that the writers didn't pick up from the season finale. So the fact that Angelo is absent in this episode, to me it played as, oh, we're going to introduce this new character so we don't have time to deal with one of our regulars, so we're just going to shift him over here. But from what you're saying, his absence is going to be more prevalent. So I'm like, what the hell, man? Because in the first season, Angelo is a character that loves his wife, and it seems very, very odd that he would do something like this, like, oh, since my wife is pregnant right now, I'm going to disappear for months on end because of my job. That doesn't make any sense at all to me. So I have I have very little faith that they're going to have a plausible explanation from a writer standpoint as to why Angelo was away for as long as he was. Because come on, man.
Right. So that's one of those awkward, like, what's going on in this second season. One of the other awkward, what's going on with this character in season 2 is that for all of season 1, you mentioned the Adam thing where we're supposed to be sympathetic to him a little bit, but he's been such a douche. The other thing is that Marjorie has been such a level-headed character. And in this, she becomes like this weird superstitious, I'm gonna believe tarot cards woman, because a big plot line of this episode is she goes to like a fortune teller because all of a sudden Bryan's back in town and she's having doubts about the wedding, and so she goes to a fortune teller who, as soon as you go to a fortune teller at a show like this, you're like, okay, well, the cards are not going to be good. And so the cards aren't good. So at first the lady's like, oh yeah, there's somebody with a B. Does that mean anything to you? And she's like, no, not the B guy, not the B guy. You mean A, no, the B. And so they flip the cards, and one of them is the Ace of Swords or whatever, which is a heart with 3 swords in it. And she's like, yeah, this is fine. It just means, you got to figure out what's in your heart, whatever. And then later the girls all get together and they do more tarot cards, which again, like, this has never been a thing that Marjorie has been into, tarot or superstitions. And as they are flipping over the cards, they're like, oh, here's that same card. And they're like, oh, but Marjorie's like, oh, that's fine. The lady told me what it meant. And they're like, that's not what it fucking means. That's not what it means at all. It means, this other thing. And so then Marjorie is having doubts about the wedding, more so than she has let on before. And certainly in the finale, everything she said to Bryan was basically, I'm marrying Adam and you're not going to ruin this. But now we're starting to wonder, is she going to marry Adam, and is Bryan going to ruin this? So I think that is interesting, but that is weaved into also this big, like, rehearsal dinner moment where everybody is giving speeches. And it's at this point that we meet Jimmy's wife, Ivy, played by Amanda Foreman, Megan from Felicity, and somebody who's on tons of Bad Robot shows and shit. So it's nice to see her. But again, she's playing the wife to a character we just met, so we really don't know much about her, but she has folded herself into this group. And everybody is giving speeches, and Dave gives an awkward speech at first that then, him and Dina have a nice moment during the speech, even though it's embarrassing. And then Bryan stands up to give a speech, and Adam's like, hell no, no way. I don't want this fucking guy to say anything. But Bryan goes on and he gives a nice speech about this baseball. And we start to see that maybe there is a way for Adam and Bryan to move forward. What are you thinking as everybody's giving these awkward but then heartfelt speeches at this rehearsal?
I really like how the speech that Dave gives sort of ties into the romantic issues that he's having with Dina in the episode. I thought that was a nice way for the writer of this episode, who is the creator of the show, for her to tie up thematically things that she brought up with them. The moment of this episode to me is when Adam stands up and he tries to sort of move the rehearsal dinner forward. And Bryan stands up and he says, no, 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 no. I have one more thing to say. And he goes on about this speech about how, in the most important moments of his life, when his father wasn't there, when his mother was working, how Adam was there, and the speech just sort of broadly contextualizes how special their relationship was. And the moment when he takes a baseball out of his pocket and tosses it over to him, I was like, God damn, that's his good writing. And I'm sitting there going, God damn, there's only like what 18 episodes left. I'm like, fuck, because this show is really, really well done. It's a shame that it got its legs taken out from underneath it. Before it had a chance to grow. But that whole exchange in the restaurant during the rehearsal dinner really gave me hope that there was going to be some sort of reconciliation between Bryan and Adam. But to move to one of your points with how Marjorie has been acting this episode with the tarot cards thing, I don't listen. The tarot card things was something that I believe was forced on Marjorie, but her nervousness, I think, is what is on display here. And I think that Marjorie still doesn't want to admit to herself that, listen, she can say she loves Adam until she's blue in the fucking face. But everybody underneath the goddamn sun knows that not to be true. And I think that she is going to have to take this all the way up into the altar, and Bryan is going to have to stand up in the church or wherever they fucking get married and pull her out of it. Cuz she is too I think that at this point she's too chicken to tell Adam that no, I really love Bryan and I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. Like I think that Marjorie is stuck and there's no way that she can get out. And I think that's what I think that's where her weird behavior comes from in this episode. And I think that that is also where the tarot cards come in a little bit.
Yeah, it could be yeah, it's just weird that she's out dress shopping and just decides to go to a tarot card shop at first, and you're like, what the hell? But as the women are doing their tarot card thing after the dinner, the guys do a typical guy thing. They go to a strip club. And so, Bryan, Adam, Jimmy, they're all hanging out, and we're introduced to one of the dancers there, Summer, played by Rachel Lefebvre, who has a moment where she's talking to the guys, and her and Adam are kind of hitting it off a little bit. So we're adding some interesting threads, I think, because we're unsure of like what's going on here and where this is going to go. And so as we're kind of wrapping our heads around this, the guys out at the strippers scene, the final scene of the episode is a moment between Bryan and Marjorie, where Bryan's just hanging out and Marjorie shows up and they have an interesting talk where, Marjorie is struggling with what is happening and what's going on. And of course, the dramatic moment at the end of the episode is that they do kiss. Um, so obviously, this is not going to be a smooth wedding. We don't know what is going to happen, but that will be something they will have to deal with in the next episode, because we do end with that moment where after, the guys have had their night out, the girls have done their talking, Marjorie and Bryan do kiss, and something is still going on, even though it's been 6 months. This is not all put in the past, and this is not all neat and tidy, and it's not going to be as simple as Marjorie just saying yes to Adam and forgetting about Bryan.
With them at the strip club, when Adam finds out that Marjorie kissed Bryan, and he sort of like, you know, is instantly upset in that moment, and decides to, stick it to Marjorie, and decides to get a private dance from the stripper. It's behavior like that that pisses me the fuck off, and that makes me wonder. Like the writers are gonna have to do a lot for me to like Adam this season. I don't like. I listen. I don't know if they're gonna have time for it. But I don't. So it's gonna be very, very interesting to see how they are going to justify that to me as an audience member, and how they're going to make it work for me also as a writer. So I think that for me, the dynamics of how they're going to fix that, and how they're going to prove to me that Adam is a nice guy, and he was only acting in that moment in the strip club out of spite towards Marjorie, because he just found out that Marjorie kissed Bryan and he didn't know about it. Um, the whole thing at the very, very end there, with Marjorie coming back to Bryan and kissing each other, I'm like, guys, this is not going to end well. So the only thing that I have to say about that before we wrap up this edition of the show is that there's a bad moon. There's a bad moon rising, and something bad is going to happen. Um, and I don't know what.
Yeah, you're definitely right. And it's a little bit kind of, I don't want to say lazy, but we already had last season Dina sleeps with Richard, and out of spite, Dave runs and sleeps with the gaming exec girl. So like he already acted out of spite, and now they are in a rough spot. And so for Adam to find out about Bryan and Marjorie's kiss, and then out of spite starts, hanging out with the stripper girl, you're like, everybody can't just be motivated by, oh, I was wrong, so now I have to wrong them. Because, like, yes, that is an impulse that a lot of people have, but for 2 out of 4 of the main people on our show to just operate exclusively out of spite to get back at their lover who has wronged them is just kind of, it feels easy. It feels a little bit simple and a little bit cliche, and I think people are more complex than that. And hopefully, moving forward in this next episode, we can get a lot of this Bryan, Marjorie, Adam stuff worked out. And it will be interesting to see, because we have alluded to certain casting things, it's not going to work out in a neat and tidy way. And will it drive characters further apart or bring them closer together when they are dealing with similar pain? And we'll have to see that going forward.
Yeah, I mean, just real quickly, some people are listen, some people, despite what their spouses do to them, despite what their fiancés do to them, some people are above it, and some people face their problems head on, and don't go for, oh, because you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you, because that just perpetuates the cycle of untrust and shit between the couples. But who knows why the creator of the show did what you did twice in the finale, and in this first episode of season 2. But with that out of the way and being said and done with, that'll do it for this edition of Radio 815. Listen, guys, if you like anything that we do here at all, you can actually follow us on Twitter. We're at JJ Universe 815, or you can send us an email at radio815@aol.com, or you can subscribe to us on YouTube. You can subscribe to us on youtube.com/radio815, where we post all our back episodes. If you want to talk to me about anything in the Bad Robot universe, whatever, you can reach me on Twitter. I'm at CreekFanatic88. But Matt, if the good folks want to reach you for whatever reason, which I'm sure they're going to have a hard time doing, what are you going to give them this week?
I'm giving them nothing, but if they want to log some movies, I am on letterbox.com/MDC3000, where we can keep up with what we're watching in the film world.
All right, guys. So on that note, thank you so much for watching. And as I often say, we'll talk back soon.
Radio 815 is a Balloonhead Productions presentation in association with Killer Newt Productions.